Good morning. Thanks very much, Will. I just have a couple of comments to begin with, and then I'd be happy to take any questions that individuals might have. So obviously, the people of Ontario saw yesterday an announcement from the Doug Ford government regarding paid sick leave. Just as I've highlighted every other day this week and now for many, many weeks, I believe it's been about 413 days since the first letter that I wrote to Doug Ford at the outset of the pandemic in March of 2020, demanding that his government reinstate paid sick leave. All the way back at the very beginning, it was abundantly clear that having a meaningful and effective paid sick leave program in place would actually help to save lives. And so I know there have been reports that have suggested that it's encouraging news that they have decided to move forward with legislation. And I will acknowledge that doing something is perhaps doing better than nothing. But I got to tell you, it's been really discouraging to watch over the last few weeks as we've seen all of the torturous twists and turns from Doug Ford and his government, from the stubborn refusal for so many months to not introduce a paid sick leave program that has literally cost lives here in this province, to know that not that many weeks ago, they were totally dismissing this concept, to know that they introduced a provincial budget that included all kinds of investments in all kinds of different important things, but had no provisions whatsoever for a paid sick leave program. And then to hear Doug Ford say to the people of Ontario through a tearful apology last week that he was going to deliver the very best paid sick leave program in North America, and to learn that what they have proposed to do as of yesterday is not the best in North America. It's not even the best in Canada. This tells me, as somebody watching this government very closely on behalf of the people of Ontario, that all of this is grudging. All of this is not something that they are doing because they believe it's the right thing. They're doing it because they're trying to save their political lives. And that's just horrifying to think of in the midst of a third wave of this pandemic that's been so tough on so many Ontario families that have suffered, families that have sacrificed, families that have tragically lost loved ones. And so, as I said last Friday, when I sent my letter to Doug Ford outlining the criteria or the guidelines or the principles that really should be at the foundation of an effective provincial paid sick leave program, I said, above all else, listen to the science table. And then what did we see yesterday afternoon? Less than an hour or two after Doug Ford's government announced their plan, we saw that Ontario's science table said, you need 10 paid sick days. That's what Ontario Liberals and others have been calling on for weeks, for months, for more than a year. And so I just have to say, we have not seen the legislation just yet that they told us yesterday would be introduced today. We're going to look at that legislation. We're going to review it very, very carefully. But again, I'm urging Doug Ford, as much as you might think you've done something heroic by announcing this yesterday, you haven't. I'm asking you to look, Doug, to look in the mirror and to realize that what you're talking about doing very clearly, grudgingly, is not good enough for the people of Ontario. We need to have a real conversation. Engage the opposition leaders. I'll only speak for myself, but I'd be happy to collaborate. I'd be happy to work with you on this to get it right. And I suspect the other opposition leaders would as well. So I want to move quickly. I wanted to move 413 days ago on this very item, but here we are. So let's try to get it right. Let's work together on this, and let's deliver a paid sick leave program, provincial paid sick leave program, that will actually save lives and help us get to the other side of this terrible ordeal that Ontarians have been grappling with for far too long. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay, just a reminder to everybody to please raise your hand using the Zoom function or write to the chat if you have a question. I believe I saw Colin DeMello from CTV Toronto raise his hand.
Good morning, Stephen. I'm wondering if 10 paid sick days is the gold standard here. I mean, the Science Advisory Table admitted that they didn't, prescribe how many days beforehand. The government, tried to figure out some kind of a middle ground. Why is 10 the number that Ontario has to go with? How do you come up with that figure as the number that workers need for paid sick leave?
So first of all, with the greatest of respect, I don't know how the government could pretend that 3 paid sick days is the middle ground. I guess, it's the middle between 0 and 6, but it's not the middle ground in terms of what we see by way of other programs that exist in places like New York State, the Yukon, and elsewhere around the world. When you think about that, it's been more than a week that Doug Ford has been isolating because he was potentially exposed to the COVID-19 virus. And so that's been far more than 3 days, 3 work days that Doug Ford has been isolating while one presumes he's getting paid. When you think about if you go to get tested today in Ontario, you might be thinking or might be waiting 2-3 days just to get the test results back. If you have to isolate, as I said a second ago regarding the premier, how many days that takes. I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons to look at a number like 10, which is broadly consistent with what the other opposition parties brought forward as well. So based on what we've heard from the science table, including what I saw on social media yesterday, what we've said throughout this process, the length of time it takes for an individual so far over the past year to get tested, to be in the clear, to potentially isolate, all of this is how we landed on the number 10. Now, am I an expert in this area? Am I a scientist? I'm not. What I do know is that when you think about all of the factors I talked about a second ago, three is far better than what Doug Ford was prepared to do until he got a political scare a number of days ago. But I don't believe that it's as much as it should be, especially during this pandemic. So that's why I'm urging Doug Ford, reconsider the number. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's collaborate and work together on it.
Follow up.
Thank you. Bill 148 that when you guys were in government had only had 2 paid sick days, correct? So why was that acceptable for the province of Ontario, but 3 is unacceptable?
Well, so first of all, I don't know how anybody could reasonably compare the world that existed prior to this pandemic with the crisis and ordeal that we find ourselves in during this pandemic. There was we did not know about COVID-19 back in 2018, obviously. So two paid sick days that we had introduced and delivered upon, that was part of a year-long consultation with a wide variety of partners and stakeholders in Ontario to arrive at how we could create a better economic and social safety net for the hardworking families of this province. By the way, those moves were opposed by the Conservative Party at the time. Doug Ford comes to power in 2018. He decides to callously get rid of the paid sick leave program. We get into COVID. It takes him over 400 days to deliver grudgingly on anything while people are losing their lives. The question isn't, why did we only have 2 pre-pandemic? The question is, why did it take Doug Ford so long to realize that his callousness and his stubbornness and his lack of capacity or interest to do the right thing was actually costing people in this province their lives? That's the real question. So how they landed on 3, by the way, I suspect, like everything else this government's done in the last number of months, likely on the back of a napkin. Look, we heard earlier this week from Doug Ford's own Minister of Labor, the implication that there might not be legislation coming forward on paid sick leave. 24, 48 hours later, they've changed course. They are a government that is flailing. They are scrambling. And most importantly, let's remember, they're scrambling not because they want to do the right thing. They're scrambling because they're trying to save their political skin. And that's disgusting.